Hello, and welcome to our webinar, Voices from the Middle, Award Winners and Dazzling Debuts. I'm Julia Smith, Senior Editor, Books for Youth at Booklist. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some technical details. The audience is in listen-only mode, but we welcome any questions you may have. On the bottom of your screen is a toolbar with a selection for Q&A. If you have a question or need technical assistance, simply click Q&A and type your message into the box that appears. We will do our best to respond to all tech-related questions, and we'll pass along all other questions to today's panelists so they can follow up with you after the webinar. Also, Booklist will now be offering closed captioning on all webinars. To enable or disable captions on your screen, please look for and click the live transcript icon on the toolbar mentioned above. From there, you can select show or hide subtitles from the menu that appears. If you choose to enable subtitles, you can adjust the size of the captions at any time by selecting subtitle settings. Last but not least, links to today's slides and title list were included in the reminder email you received from Zoom 1 hour ago. To download them, please open that email, scroll to the bottom, and click on the link located there. You can also download the slides and title list by copying the URLs on this screen into your browser. We have a great program in store for you today, including read-alouds from today's amazing panelists, and a special panel conversation too. To kick off the festivities, I'll now turn things over to today's moderator, Gillian Engberg, children's literature consultant and specialist. Take it away, Gillian.
Hello, everyone. I'm Gillian Engberg, and I'm so thrilled to join you today for a conversation with these exceptional authors. I'm going to introduce everyone, and then we'll get to hear the authors read a little bit from their work, and then we'll come back together for our group discussion. So on to the introductions. The first author we plan to hear from today is Arnée Watson, whose previous award-winning books include the Newbery Honor book, Piecing Me Together. Today, we'll hear from her new chapter book series about a rising fifth grader in Portland, Oregon named Ryan Hart. Both of the books released this year received starred reviews in Booklist, which called the first title Ways to Make Sunshine, a beautifully rendered series of vignettes featuring a Black girl developing into her own personhood. Arnée is unfortunately unable to join us today, and so we've asked Ellen Hagan, who has both written and taught with Arnée, to read a passage from the Ryan Hart books. And next we'll hear from Gillian McDunn, whose previous titles include the Texas Bluebonnet winner, Caterpillar Summer. Today she'll be reading from her new middle grade novel, These Unlucky Stars, about Annie, a prickly sixth grader who is trying to make sense of her mother's departure years earlier. Over the course of an unexpected summer, she grows into new friendships and her own talents. In a starred review, Publishers Weekly admires this novel's tenderly drawn intergenerational relationship and Annie's expressive voice. And next up will be Ellen Hagan, who is the co-author with Arnée Watson of the acclaimed novel Watch Us Rise. Today, she'll be sharing her new novel in verse, Reckless, Glorious Girl, which is set in Bardstown, Kentucky, and which features rising seventh grader Beatrice Miller, who feels caught between her responsible, pragmatic mother and her live-in-the-moment, exuberant grandmother. Taken together, the poems that make up this novel show a keen understanding of adolescent preoccupations, according to Booklist's reviewer. And then finally, we'll hear from Arnée Flores, whose debut novel, The FIREBIRD Song, follows two 12-year-olds whose linked fates send them on an epic quest with the highest possible stakes. Within this richly imagined fantasy world, Arnée has created wonderfully realistic, well-developed characters, and in a starred review, Booklist called this a fast-paced, heart-squeezing adventure. So let's move on and hear today's authors read aloud from these wonderful books. And Ellen, let's start with you reading from Arnée's Ryan Hart series. I believe you're going to start with Ways to Grow Love.
That's right. Hello, I'm so happy to be here to share from Arnée's amazing follow-up book, Ways to Grow Love. I'm going to read from the chapter Splash, which is one of my daughter's favorite chapters. Splash. Amanda has come over today. She's with me, Kiki, and Ray riding our bikes to Alberta Park so we can meet up with Aiden and Logan. Ray says, I found a shortcut, follow me. And he pedals fast, turning at the corner. But instead of going straight to the end of the block, Ray turns right into what I think is a driveway at first, but then I realize it's an alley. It's kind of like a hidden street tucked away in the middle of the block. Isn't this cool, Ray shouts? It's a whole maze back here. We ride through connected alleys, and I pretend that we are in tunnels and no one can see us. Being on the backside of people's houses is kind of strange because I'm used to only seeing the front, where everything looks more put together. Flower pots on porches, freshly cut grass, trimmed hedges. But the parts no one can see aren't that pretty at all. This is where the garbage cans are, and bikes with flat tires and rusting tools, and stray cats wandering around. Turning left, Ray calls out, and then we are across the street from the park. Whoa, that was fast, Kiki says. Super fast, Amanda says. We should come this way all the time. I can see Aiden and Logan at the park with Aiden's older cousin, Megan. She watches him during the summer while his parents are at work, so she kind of takes care of us all since we play together just about every day. We say our hellos and Megan hugs us girls. She rubs the top of Ray's head and says, "What's up? Y'all ready for a fight?" She is laughing and points to a cooler that is sitting under a tree next to a beach bag stuffed with towels. Logan opens the cooler. I'm soaking everybody. He takes out a water balloon and pretends to throw it at Kiki, but it doesn't leave his hand. Kiki takes out 2 balloons. Oh, I bet you can't get me. Hold on, Megan says. There are rules. Actually, it's not a free-for-all water balloon fight. I thought it would be fun to play dodgeball, but with balloons. Aiden says boys against girls, so you can lose, Amanda says. Whatever, Ray says. If we play boys versus girls, you 3 will be soaked and all of us will be dry. Dry? You don't think we can get even in a few hits? I look at Kiki and Amanda and we all just shake our heads. Okay, well, first a few rules, Megan says. Aiden sucks his teeth. Who has rules for fun? We do. No throwing at someone's face. If anyone is standing here touching this tree, they are in the dry zone and can't get hit. Each team gets a point for hitting someone on the opposite team, right? Aiden asks. Yes, and I will keep points, Megan says. All right, let's do this. Ray pulls 2 balloons out of the cooler and walks a short distance away, far enough to be out of the dry zone, but close enough to run back for more ammunition. We all get in line, girls on one side, boys on the other. I am holding 3 balloons, 2 in my left hand, 1 in my right. Ready, Megan shouts, and we begin. And now I will hand it over to Gillian McDunn.
Thank you, Ellen. That was amazing. I want to go to Ellen's house and have her read stories to me every night. That was incredible. Okay, so yes, I'm Gillian McDunn. I'm going to read from my book, These Unlucky Stars. My chapters for this book are really short. In part, that was because how the voice for my main character, Annie, came out, and partly because I had a young friend who kind of requested that I make shorter chapters because long ones can be overwhelming. So today I'm going to do the first chapter and just a tiny bit of chapter 2. So let's get started. You can measure how lucky someone is by asking them whether they believe in it. Lucky people say, there's no such thing. To them, the universe is orderly and kind. Hard work always leads to happiness. Life goes according to plan. They never notice the million times their luck steps in to save the day. My brother Ray is like this. He's a sunny side up, lemons into lemonade, golden ticket kind of person. A real umbrella remembering type. I can hardly stand it. The truth is, sometimes people try hard, but things don't go their way. Ma used to say that about me. I may mess up, but I'm always trying. Unlucky Annie, she'd whisper, gathering the pieces of the green glass lamp. Of course, she'd murmur, dabbing at my bloody knees with a cool washcloth. Born under an unlucky star, she'd say, like it was a song we both knew by heart. Then she went away. When Ray was 5 and I was only 4. kissed us both goodbye, and coasted her pumpkin-colored station wagon out of our long and narrow driveway, gone in the blink of a turn signal. We haven't heard from her since. Dad and Ray don't talk about Ma. They don't know that I think about her all the time. I might be the only one who remembers the genius of spaghetti dinners eaten in the bathtub. I'm the only one who knows about those midnight thunderstorms where she and I huddle together on the plaid sofa eating sliced plums. Who else would buy a preschooler squishy tubes of paint from the grown-up art store because some things are worth it? She smelled like carrots fresh from the garden. Her hair was the exact color of a new penny. I don't know if it's possible to wear out memories. She left before I had a chance to store up very many. My mind runs over the same ones again and again until they've almost gone smooth, like pebbles in the stream that winds behind our little house. At times, I feel like I'm at the edge of remembering something more, something new, but it's always just out of reach, floating away like a balloon with a too short string. If she were here, I'd want to know everything, all the good things and the bad things. I'd ask her if she ever felt unlucky too. I already know she believes in luck, but I wonder if she thinks a person can be so unlucky they act as a magnet for trouble, a lightning rod that draws every bad thing directly their way. In other words, am I the reason she left? But I have no one to ask, so for now, I keep that question in a quiet corner of my heart. It's probably true that given my track record for broken bones, broken things, and all around bad luck in general, I have no business at all sitting on a roof. But this roof is a good one. It runs right outside my bedroom window and has the best view in all of Oak Branch, North Carolina. This is the spot where thick pine trees give way to a wide panorama of the Blue Ridge Mountains, also known as my mountains, because there's no one in the world who loves them like I do. Each morning, the roof practically calls my name. Annie, come take a look. Your mountains are shining real pretty today. It's an extremely persuasive roof. Okay, and now we're going to go back to Ellen to read from her book.
Thank you. That was so beautiful. So I will be reading from Reckless, Glorious Girl, and I'm going to read a couple of the first poems in the beginning of the book from Beatrice's voice, figuring out who she is and how she wants to show up in the world. The first poem is called Beatrice Miller's Burning Questions. Will Mom and Mama ever see me as more than a little kid? Will they ever trust me, recognize my growing, see my evolution, witness my expansion? I've been studying other words for mature in our big old thesaurus, and they include evolve, develop, blossom, ripen, arrive. So my question is, will those words ever happen to me? How can I celebrate all the parts of me? Comic book nerd, garden and movie lover, bike rider, swim teamer, nacho eater, mama and mom hugger, late night couch cuddler. Should I shine a light on all the parts of me that no one can see? Nervous, anxious, embarrassed, awkward. Maybe if I could share those feelings, then people would see more of the real me. And then, will Mariella, Stacey Ann, and I ever be officially cool? Not outskirts, outside, sideline cool, but ruling the school, making all the jokes, getting all the laughs, full lunch table, friends, finding us after the bell rings. You know, that kind of cool, the kind that's smooth, enters the room before you do. Anyway, I've got about 1 trillion more, but you have to start somewhere. Beatrice. Maybe my parents could have chosen a name not like a granny. Less grandma, more teenage. Less arthritic, more athletic. Less geriatric, more youngish. Less old folks home, more spring break. Less ancient, more modern. You get the idea. The fact that it really is my mama's name doesn't make it any better. Fact is, it makes it worse because I love my mama more than the ocean or French toast or sleeping in or bacon. And when I don't spend all my time hating it, my name becomes a beacon, some light to hang on to when it's too dark to see myself. And now I'll hand it back over to Arnée Flores.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here with you. I have never had the opportunity to read my stories for a live audience before, so I'm so excited. I'm going to be reading from the FIREBIRD Song, and the part that I'm reading is when the story really ramps up. I have 2 children aboard a magical barge, and they have just discovered a way to call the ancient wind. It must be given a secret. I don't have any secrets, said Pruitt a bit too quickly. His heart pricked, but he kept his face even. He wasn't that person anymore. What did it matter if he kept it to himself? Calliope tilted her head. I suppose I count as a secret, don't you? So, holding the barge storm glass in her hands, Calliope stood at the prow, just behind the figurehead, staring out at the black water. Luminescent algae floated in great swaths, and the scent of brine filled her nostrils. Silver fish flashed. Calliope shivered, sudden apprehension humming through her fingers. What would Meredith say? She tossed her curls. He'd tell her to go inside, to wait for someone grown up to do something. But she didn't want to wait. She wanted to act. Her mother had written the words on the wall for her, had paid for them with blood, and she wasn't going to waste them. She held the storm glass above her head and spoke into the darkness. Ancient spirit of the south wind, I summon you with this secret. I am Calliope, the lost princess of Lyrica. I have been hiding for 12 years, but I hide no longer. Pruitt stood behind her, skin prickling with the sudden energy of the moment. There was something new in Calliope's voice, something fierce and powerful. She seemed almost to grow as she spoke, and the orb glowed in her fingertips. Now I'm going to turn it back over to our moderator, Gillian Engberg, to start off our conversation.
Thank you so much, all of you. Those were so wonderful. So I will invite you all to turn your microphones on and your videos on so we can see you. There we go. And so thank you so much. That was mesmerizing. And so let's begin our conversation with age 12. So all of you chose this age for your characters, and I would love to talk more about why that age felt like the most interesting place to land. So maybe Ellen, we can start with you. And then go on to Gillian, that summer in between 6th and 7th grade is where you both set your book. So Ellen, let's hear from you first.
Yeah, thank you. I know, I feel like 12 years old is that sort of turning point. You know, I wanted a book. I remember being 12 and wanting to play so much. I had friends that we played dolls together and we played family and we did lots of imagination, lots of imaginary games. And then I had also a sort of a collective of friends who didn't want to imagine, like they were beyond that. They'd sort of moved past the imagination, and they were teenagers, about to be teenagers. And I remember being sort of caught in that moment and feeling like a kid, but also really wanting to be grown up at the same time. And I wanted a character that was navigating that push-pull. I have a 10-year-old daughter now, and she's figuring it out right now as well. And I just wanted young people to be able to figure out, to sort of, figure out who they are and to be on that journey. I remember very closely, and to have somebody to look to and go, oh, I could also still play a little bit longer, and I can also be okay with my family. I wanted to see characters that were like them and struggling in that same way. Yeah.
Yeah,
Gillian,
same for me. I love the in-betweenness of age 12. And I know we call that age group tweens. And I guess that is a good term for it because they really are, not just in between those worlds, but alternately navigating both of those worlds, like in a given day or in a given hour, sometimes in a given minute, if you're talking to one of them in terms of like where they are with their logic and with their feelings and what's going on with their bodies. Another thing I really like of that around that 10 to 12 age is that for a lot of kids, it's the first time they're going out into the world more. So that means they might encounter things that they need to process in terms of, what they're experiencing. But I think also times they often kind of look back at home and say, oh, okay, well, I guess things aren't always the way they are in my house. So what does that mean about what's going on in my house and with my family? And that's, kind of a big theme about Annie she's doing sorting out of her present and her past in the book. So.
That's beautiful. Ellen, it looks like we've got you back. Arnée, I would love to turn the question to you, but with a little twist, because in your book, age 12 that transition has an actual name. This is a named stage of life. You reach the age of hope. So big deal. Tell us more about what this means.
I think that 12 for me, in the same way that Ellen and Gillian both said so beautifully, it's this sort of final moment of childhood, which is sad and poignant. But I think that I really wanted to capture the magic of that, this last clinging to childlike feelings while also learning responsibility and having, in my book, it is something that's so great, saving the world, right? It's this huge thing, but it feels big to kids to see their future ahead of them and know that anything is still possible. That's so scary when you still feel a little bit like a child. And something that, Ellen, you do so well, the awkwardness of that precipice that they're sort of on. And I think about being 12 when I was turning 13, and that night my friends came and they kidnapped me from my bedroom and put a blindfold over my eyes and they threw me into the pool, and there was a big party. But all I remember is that my nightgown turned in like see-through, and I was so afraid to get out of the pool. And so it's that combination of, it was so fun and wild and all my friends were there and we wanted to play in the pool, but also I felt my body and my awkwardness and my strangeness. And within the fantasy world, things look different, but I hope that I've captured a little bit of that, being both a child and having responsibilities that are big on your shoulders.
A little bit about, this has been a year of just profound loss, and loss is something that shapes all of your characters in, small ways and immeasurably large ways. Ellen, are you with us? A little, okay. Maybe we can.
I'm having a little connection issue. I'm not sure what's happening. Oh no.
Okay.
I'm gonna try to come back on. So
okay.
Sorry.
Okay, we'll come back to you. So Arnée, since we left off with you talking about the age of hope, maybe we can continue, because the characters in your society have lost is hope. And so maybe we can speak a little bit more about loss in the context of your whole world, in the whole fantasy world.
Yes, it begins in a world that it is itself, without sunlight, without daylight, without the promise of tomorrow having any light. The entire world is rainy and full of storms, and people are hiding indoors, which I think is a little ironic considering what we're all coming out of. But it's this fear that has overcome their hope. And so one of the reasons that we have the age of hope is that children, as often is the case, are the last to cling to hope a little bit. They They have that brightness within them that isn't trampled down by life and by, so I have grown-ups here who are day in, day out, just having to deal with, how do I put food on the table? How do we survive? How do I do it? And it makes it hard to be a good parent because they're doing their very, very best to just keep everyone alive in this scary world where fire itself is a danger. It turns into a monster. So there's no warmth. And so we have sort of a juxtaposition between the grown-ups and they're having to focus just on getting through each day and not dying, and our children who are still looking for the magic and almost feel let down by the grown-ups. So they're looking for hope and saying, how can we fix this ourselves? Because clearly the adults are too downtrodden and worried to make things better.
I think that's such a great theme of just the kids figuring things out for themselves in this book. Just, you know, Ellen, it's such a theme throughout all of your beautiful poems, just how do I shape my life? And so if we've got you back, maybe we can talk a little bit more about how loss and learning to live with it really shapes Beatrice's life, particularly at this pivotal moment for her.
Oh,
Loss, Gillian?
Oh.
Loss? Oh no,
Loss. Yes.
Is it coming clear?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had just said before this, I was like, Zoom, you know, I don't know, I'm still struggling with this a year and 2 months later. So hopefully, fingers crossed, I just came back on and it's feeling okay now. Yeah, thank you for that question. I think loss is, you know, Beatrice's father has passed away and passed. Her whole life is figuring out what is her identity, who is she without this parental figure, but with this incredible mom and Mema who is quirky and eccentric and so much who she is. I think Mema really shows up, and Mema is very much patterned after my parents and my husband's parents, so the grandparents that are from you know, of my children, characteristics from all of them really. And so I think she has wonderful role models, but I think she doesn't have, you know, with the loss of her father and figuring out who is she without him and who, you know, how does she sort of retain some of who he was without knowing him, you know? So I think a lot of what Beatrice does is figuring out, you know, how to connect back to her father through her grandmother, through her Mema, and how to sort of carry him with her. So I think it definitely, she's following a map to who she is, and she's using loss to sort of, you know, figure out her journey, you know.
That is so beautifully phrased. And Gillian, let's just go straight to you, because I feel like Annie is following this sort of map of loss and just trying to reconcile her memories with new realities.
Absolutely. I love the way you said that, Ellen. So I actually had a big loss in my childhood. My brother I have two brothers. My middle brother is only 1.5 years younger than I am. And when I was 11 and he was 9.5, he died. He passed away. And so one thing that I have noticed just in my life and processing that loss is there's something about experiencing something like that at a young age. You know, obviously it shapes a lot of, you know, who you are, but when a kid has a loss like that, and I think about this now with my kids and the pandemic, it's like, as they get a little older, they're going to have different questions and their brain is going to have developed in a way that they can understand different answers. And so that was something that I really wanted to come across with Annie, is that she's now, you know, she doesn't know a lot of what's happened with her mom. And some of that is because, you know, dad doesn't really talk about her, right? They're kind of these like practical, kind of move forward, solid kinds of people. But Annie hasn't asked either. So it's sometimes, I think as a parent, sometimes it's really hard to know what your kids are ready for. And it's sort of this process of her, you know, opening up and being a little more vulnerable in terms of relationships with like friendships and relationships out of the family. And that kind of affects the way she's able to be more like vulnerable and emotionally close with the people in her family.
So there's so much there. So Gillian, let's stay with you for a minute, because I think in addition to, you know, really looking at family stories, family memories. The sense of place in your novel is really something that seems to sustain Annie and is really a support and guidance. So let's talk about where your stories take place for all of you. And Gillian, if we can start with you and just how these great regional details, what you chose to put in and add extra layers.
Yeah, absolutely. So far, all of my books have taken place in North Carolina. And so I'm not actually from North Carolina, though. I'm from Southern California. And the neat thing about that is, California is this amazing place that has, mountains, and it has the beach, and it's, beautiful. And North Carolina is a place that has the mountains and has the beach and is beautiful, but totally different in a completely different way. And so we moved to North Carolina. It was sort of it was a ridiculous time in life because my kids were like 4 and 2.5 and then 4 weeks old. And we got in a car and we drove from St. Louis, where we'd been living for 6 years, into North Carolina. It took us 4 days to do it because, we had a baby. So it was just this really strange time, and we were going into the mountains, and I'd never been to the mountains, like the Smoky Mountains, the Blue Ridge Mountains. And I was like, oh, these are so different, because in California, the mountains are so high, you don't have any green at the top at all, right? There's that tree line that cuts off. But in the South, the mountains go all, the trees go all the way up. They're just not that high. But we had this perfect moment of driving, into the mountains, and it was the sun was going down and it was golden everywhere. And there were oh, look, there's a waterfall and a stream, and everything was just green and glowing and perfect, and so different from what I knew as the mountains. So I think that really just opened my eyes wide to being able to kind of just being so drawn to something because it was so new, and I could compare it to something that I knew that was so different. I think it just makes me appreciate it more and more. So I love the mountain. My first book was about the North Carolina ocean, beach. And then I wanted to, I also really like making towns. So when I was a little kid, I would always make up characters and towns and what it looked like, and I would draw it. And I just really think that's very fun now. So yes, I did both of those, mountains and my little dream town.
Thank you, Gillian. And so Ellen, let's talk about, in your case, you're writing about your own roots in Bardstown, Kentucky. So tell us a little bit about how place is important in your poems.
Yes. So I grew up in Bardstown, Kentucky, which is a small town, about 10,000 people between Louisville and Lexington. So it's definitely a small town feel. And I remember, so, I grew up in Kentucky. I lived there till I was 22. And then I've been in New York for about 20 or so years. And everything, those first 20 years in Kentucky, I tried everything to get out of Kentucky. And as soon as I got out of Kentucky, I was trying to figure out all the ways to get back to Kentucky. I was always drawn to, I feel like Kentucky is always in everything I do. I think about my formative years growing up and the hillsides or the grass or the rolling hills of Kentucky. Kentucky has a beautiful landscape. And I think about the smell of Kentucky, the smell of the air in winter, but also the thickness of the heat in the summer. It's humid, it's hot in the summer. I mean, there's something about my memory that is also connected to Kentucky that I wanted to get that lushness. I wanted the beauty, and I wanted I wanted that small town feel where everybody knew everybody knew your business. They knew your family. They would always, if I was a Hagan, they were like, okay, which Hagans are you from? Are you from the New Haven Hagans or the Bardstown Hagans? It was very much like that. And so I wanted that in the book too. I wanted this, and of course it wasn't always great growing up in a small town, but it definitely felt familiar, and it had this sort of thread of home through it. So everybody kind of knowing your business means everybody's also looking out for you in a way. So that's what I wanted, that feel. I'm always looking for my hometown in books too. And sometimes I see that in other books too. I'm like, oh, that's not Bardstown, but it has the same vibe of that same small town and beautiful landscape. So yeah, I'm hoping that Beatrice, we held that place well in the book, and people can see it or connect with it, even if they haven't been there.
I thought you did that so well and so beautifully. And there were two things that I wanted to ask you about in terms of like a place. And one was there's that line about people underestimate the South. And then there's the discussion about like mama and mima and like what it means if you call your grandma that. And I just thought both of those things were just, I'm an outsider to the South, but like just from my like observations over the last 10 years, I feel like those things were just so just specific and detailed and like, yes, absolutely. So I don't know if you wanted to share.
I will just say about Mema, I was about 17 years old. I went to this program called the Governor's School for the Arts in Kentucky. You can sort of audition to get into the different art forms. And I had a teacher, Kelly Norman Ellis, who was an Appalachian poet. And the Appalachian poets were poets of color who basically, if you looked up Appalachia in the dictionary, it said white residents of the Appalachian Mountains. And Kelly and a whole lot of other writers of color were like, no, we exist here and we've been writing here. And so she taught me that summer and she transformed everything. And I remember her saying, we wrote about these I Come From poems and everybody wrote grandma. And she said, how many of you all actually use the word grandma? And maybe one or two did. And she said, okay, what do you call? And somebody said abuela, and somebody said mima and mama. And she said, if you call your grandmother something that's not grandma, call it by its name. Take it, own who you are, own your traditions and your culture and your history. And so I always think back to those lessons of like, say what exists, tell your truth, and I feel the same way about Gillian and Arnée, your books too. And I wanted to ask you all about, Arnée, how do you build a world? I mean, I think that's what I'm also fascinated with is I'm building something I know, but I'm always wanting to build these dream worlds and imaginative worlds. So how do you even get started doing that? What is the craft of that?
Oh, goodness. I feel a little bit as if people are applauding me for bringing something made from scratch to a barbecue, but really I've gone to different grocery stores and like thrown it all on a special platter. And because this book is also my home, it is the Pacific Northwest, this world, although I've named it and I've cut pieces and brought it together, I have my mountains, which are so very much the Cascades, and then this volcano, which here in Seattle, the Mount St. Helens eruption is still very much in everybody's minds, and kids do drills to know what they would do if there were an eruption. So that speaks to my home here. The rain, I wrote this during the autumn here in Seattle, and it was raining and storming, and I was in this teeny tiny rickety above garage apartment that would shake as the garage door would open and shake as the storms were overhead. And I'm sort of in the damp, the laundry closet, there's like mildew growing. I'm constantly spraying it. So it was this place that I love. I love that damp. I love the rain. I love that. But I wanted to have like, what would it look like from a different perspective? What if nature really was against us? So even though, yes, this is a fully developed fantasy in this fantasy make-believe place where there can be magic, it's still the Pacific Northwest. And I just, you both, the home that you've created is this gorgeous steadying thing when there's inner turmoil and there's fighting in the family, it's still home. And I felt that so deeply to my core. And I think about the relationships that are formed, and especially with the older people in both of your books. Both of your books center around this older person who is sort of teaching and helping. And I wonder how you stay in the mind of both a 12-year-old and, Gillian, in your case, I'm going to throw the question to you because I think she's probably an octogenarian. I don't know that you say how old that Gloria is, but it's so beautiful how she's warm and also crotchety.
Yeah, I love those characters where like there gets to be a little bit of that slow burn relationship where they're kind of grumpy in the beginning. So yeah, that's who Gloria is to me. And that character was directly inspired by my godmother, Barbara, who is just this like, I don't know, just this really amazing woman. she, had multiple careers. She never got married. She never had kids, but she was super involved with me and with my youngest brother as well. And just was really like a part of like my web outside of my actual home, in terms of having her and her support. But yeah, she would just tell you what she thought, like with no holds barred. And I miss her all the time, but she just like, when my oldest was born almost 16 years ago, I sent Barbara pictures and she's like, I have to, Nora is just so beautiful. And I was like, oh yeah, she's beautiful. Yes, of course. My baby is so cute. So she kept going, she's like, yeah, so I just can't get it because you and your husband, you're average. So how does that work? And it was just the funniest thing. And it didn't, I don't care. Every mom was like, yeah, my baby is like the most gorgeous human on the planet. But yeah, that's what she thought. You never had to wonder where you were. And so my goal was to write somebody like that, Annie has a lot of uncertainty and mysteries in her home. And yeah, Gloria will just tell her exactly what she thinks. So yeah.
And that's also a quality for Mima and your story, Ellen, isn't it? She is free spirit.
Yeah, it's so much like it. I love Gillian what you just said, because there's so many moments that my parents and my in-laws, there's so many moments that I wanted to put in the book that sort of some character driven things that I'm like, okay, we have to, because it's so loving, but it's so truth telling, and sometimes the truth is a complicated place. And so I think those characters are so great when you're writing them, because they can take the story and run with it. They take the story and especially for a 12-year-old who's listening to someone who's been, I've been 12 and now I'm in my 40s. So I'm able to see myself and look back and be like, oh, 12-year-old Ellen, you should have just been relaxed about that, or just taking it easy. And same for 16-year-old and 21-year-old, and so when I think about the idea, my grandmother's almost, my grandmother, my children's great grandmother is almost 102. She'll be 102 next month. And so I think about longevity in terms of what you start to know if you exist in the world for this amount of time, like what lessons you have. And of course you want to tell the young people in your life. I'm a teacher. I'm always like, okay, but I want to tell you what to do. I don't want you to make the same mistakes I made, knowing that they have to. But I think in a story, it's fun to be able to have them make mistakes, but maybe not all the mistakes. I think you can sort of craft it in a different way. And that's what I love about storytelling, and having a character like that be able to lead the story in a way. Yeah.
I love the intergenerational friendships and relationships are so vivid. And also you all write so beautifully about friendship among the same age peers. So I would love to talk a little bit more about just what those friendship scenes allow you to explore. And then what are some of the challenges about really getting them right, because they're all so authentic. And so Ellen, maybe we can start with you and then move around a little.
Sure. So Beatrice has two best friends, really, Mariella and Stacey Ann, and I loved writing them. Stacey Ann especially, because Stacey Ann is outspoken. She can kind of do everything that the other two kind of want to do, and I think there's a great moment where, well, I think it's a great moment for Stacey Ann where she sticks up for them in a way that I feel so proud of their friendship, because they're active, they ride their bikes, they're building a tree house, they're on the swim team, they're playing video games at the roller skating rink. I think they are still doing that imaginary play with Beatrice. So I think she kind of thinks, well, I really want to do this, but there's this other group of kids that seem like they're I should be with them. I should want to be with them. But when she stays, and I love when the three of them are eating, or they're at the slumber party and there's pizza and there's tacos. There's something about the community part of them eating and enjoying life. That's what I grew up with. There's about 9 of us who we grew up from like kindergarten through high school. We went to the same school. We're still in touch. We've stayed this kind of cohort of friends because we knew each other back when, and there's something about the longevity of those friendships. So I wanted to create the friendships that I remember, and ones that also are healthy. Renee and I talk about this a lot. Well, how do you create healthy friendships for girls? Because that's what existed for us, and we wanted to showcase that. We didn't want it to be girls tearing each other apart and fighting, and that's just not my reality. So I wanted there to be this tender, loving relationship for the girls. So I'm hoping that that shows through in the book.
And Gillian, that's something that Annie's wrestling. I mean, she's a little prickly. She doesn't let people in easily. So let's talk.
Yeah, I was thinking, like, after I was talking about Gloria, I'm like, yeah, I should probably mention, yeah, Annie is kind of that character too, where she just, she's just very unfiltered. And I think what's interesting for her about friendships is, so she's used to just kind of putting whatever out there. And then it's pointed out to her early in the book that she doesn't really have any friends of her own. She has her brother, who's very close in age, and she has his friends. So she's kind of like orbiting around them, like near them, but they're not really friends. So Annie kind of takes it to heart, well, kind of in her own like irritated way, but she does decide she wants a friend. And I think in that friendship she has with Faith, she kind of gets to realize that you can't just be unfiltered. Like, your family has to like you or at least put up with you. But Faith kind of calls her out on something when Annie is not very polite in the way she acts, kind of, like unthinkingly, not intentionally rude. But I think sometimes hearing those voices from peers can make an impact, like a powerful one, in a good way. And it is in a good way in that story. So I think that was a really important part.
And you all capture that friction, which makes the scene so authentic. In Arnée, there's a lot of friction between your two, sort of unlikely friends.
Yes, they have such different worldviews. I think because Calliope, in some ways, was sheltered from this terrible world that is happening because she is under the ground in a cave, and in her cave there is warmth, there is fire, there are her books, she doesn't have any friends, and she's lonely, but she's also found her own way to create happiness in her space. Whereas Pruitt has had to deal with the day in, day out horrors of this world. He doesn't get protection. He does it in the same way. And so when they come together and they have those two really different views of what the world should be, Calliope still has this hope that everything can get better, but Pruitt has been dealing with real life, dealing with grown-up worries. And so he feels that not only is he the wiser, smarter one who is going to tell Calliope how it really is, but then as they come together, he sees who she really is and sees her strength, and they each learn from each other. But one of the biggest elements is that Pruitt specifically comes into this believing he has to save the world and that his goal and he's destined to do it. And so he comes in believing that, and toward the end he realizes that it's actually friendship and the closeness that is his job. He's there to support Calliope and to love her and to be a good friend. And that's really the importance. And so friendship is just such a major thread here. It's part of building hope for me in my life. I would just not be who I am without friends who have challenged me and supported me and loved me when I was in the darkness and when I was facing monsters. Without your friends to pull you out of that, I don't know how you manage it. So I really wanted to capture that.
You're here, beautifully said. Let's switch gears just a little bit, because Ellen, I would love to give you a chance to talk a little bit more about writing in verse. So you are a poet, and let's talk more about what writing in verse allows you to do to create your stories.
Sure. Yeah, I just have to say, Arnée, I love that you said challenged, supported, and loved. I've jotted that down because I was like, oh, those are so challenged. I just wanted to echo that, because I think that's so important too, like friends that push you in the right ways too. Yeah. So my first, I started sort of as a poet. I was saying that I started as sort of what I think of as a documentarian. I was a big journal keeper, and then poems, wrote a lot of very dramatic, hopeless or sad poems for a long time, and then figured out what I loved about poetry. And so I I started as a poet. I have my MFAs in fiction, and so I've kind of been genre hopping. I didn't actually know the as much as I could about novels in verse. I didn't know how many there were out there. I opened the door of novels in verse, and I'm thinking of Elizabeth Acevedo, The Poet X, and The Moon Within, Aida Salazar. Like, there's so many novels in verse, especially YA and middle grade, that I started to get very taken with. And I thought, oh, I didn't realize you could write a novel this way. Let me try to. And so I had not written a novel in verse before Reckless Glorious Girl, and the joy I got out of it, because each poem is its own, but it's also telling a story. So I love the space and the breadth on the page. I love that each poem could be taken out. I think not all of them, but some poems could stand alone. And some poems, I'm working on a YA in verse now, and I really loved the process of starting this as sort of knowing a little bit more about it. Like, I knew then, okay, what does each poem feels like it's building this whole story, and how do I put them together? It can be hard because sometimes you're like, I want to say a lot more but it's the economy of language. Good poems are you have to be economic about what words you choose. And so I do like that. You try to carry a lot of emotion in a small package sometimes. So I'm very excited. I'm excited to read more novels in verse, and I'm excited to figure, to grow myself in that form, and to see, how it shapes and changes as I, keep doing it.
Oh, thank you. That was beautifully described. We are coming up on sort of the closing of our hour. And so I wanted to, it's just been such a pleasure to spend time with all of you. And I wanted to close with actually the same question for all of you. And that is just, in addition to just the pure enjoyment of reading your books, is there a scene, a question, an idea, a feeling that you hope that readers might hold in their minds after they finish the book? So maybe, Gillian, we can start with you.
Yeah, gosh, without giving out, I really liked a good happy ending. So I kind of try to put my characters through it and then have a good happy ending. So I hope that stays with kids or anyone who reads it. There's also a really big argument Annie has with her brother Ray, and it's kind of a pivotal moment in the book. I mean, they really have it out. Like, a lot of things are said that have not been said, and it all works out well. But I think it's I hope that it feels reassuring to kids, especially kids who might be having some friction with siblings, to just know that, like, that is such a powerful bond that can kind of grow and change and adapt as everybody gets older. And I think that's a positive takeaway. So hopefully that will be what readers take with them.
Things change, it gets better. Thank you. Arnée, let's go over to you. Same question. So just a feeling, a scene, an idea that you hope kids might hold in their minds when they finish.
I think that the theme and the importance, and what I really want people to ponder after they read this book and while they read it, is, where do we find hope? Where does hope come from when everything good is gone, when everything that brings us joy and happiness that is tangible is destroyed? I want to really have people look at hope and think about it and imagine and consider where they will find hope if their life begins to sort of fall apart.
It's a beautiful question, a beautiful challenge from those friends who challenge us. Ellen, let's go over to you.
Yeah, Gillian said in your reading in the beginning, you had this line, "Some things are worth it," and which sounded so poetic and so beautiful. I jotted it down because I thought, that I think for me, the story is definitely centered around friendship and staying true to who you are and figuring out, like, it's worth it to figure out who you are. It's worth it to stay the course and to ask all the hard questions and to figure, to sort of trust your family and the people who love you. And there's, I'll leave it with this too. There's a part about Kentucky. I want them to know that places are complicated everywhere and to not have any stereotypes or assumptions about places. These two little quick lines are: to other people, Kentucky equals country, hillbilly, backwoods, uneducated, misunderstood. But to me, Kentucky equals home, family, a garden in bloom, everyone who matters, my whole life story. So I want them to carry, to get rid of any assumptions or ideas about place, and get to know people and the places they come from on an individual level, and get to know them, you know, and their hearts. Yeah.
So beautiful. Oh, I can't thank the three of you enough. And of course, we wish Arnée could have joined us, but we all look forward to sharing her books far and wide. I think at this point we wave goodbye and we turn things back over to Julia Smith from Booklist. Thank you all so much. It's been such a pleasure.
This was
Thank you.
so fun.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Both Gillian's, Ellen, Arnée. It's been such a delight hearing from you all, and we really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. You can find original recordings featuring all of our authors today at teachingbooks.net. Log on to the address you see here for free access to thousands of resources that help connect readers deeply with their books and their authors. For the latest information about the books discussed in today's presentation and tons of other children's and YA titles, be sure to follow Bloomsbury on Twitter at Bloomsbury Kids or on Instagram at Bloomsbury YA. And to download ARCs of must-have middle grade and YA books on NetGalley right now, head over to bit.ly/3N6XOW9. Tomorrow, all attendees will receive an email containing links to today's slide presentation, title list, certificate of completion, and video recording. For more about Booklist webinars, be sure to visit booklistonline.com/webinars, where you can view archives of past webinars and register for upcoming ones, like those you see here. Did you know that registration for ALA's virtual annual conference and exhibition is open now? Taking place between June 23rd and 29th, this year's conference will feature amazing speakers, educational programming, and an opportunity to connect with colleagues and librarians everywhere. Plus, if you register before April 30th, you'll save on registration rates. Visit https://2021.alaannual.org for more details. And if you aren't yet a subscriber to Booklist, pair the print reading experience with the convenience of online access at booklistonline.com and lock in print and digital access by taking advantage of this special webinar offer and get Booklist for only $75. That's all for now. Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar. And one more big thank you to today's moderator, Gillian Engberg, panelists, Gillian McDunn, Arnée Watson here in spirit, Ellen Hagan, and Arnée Flores, and our sponsor, Bloomsbury. This concludes today's webinar. See you next time.